Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Story of a Storyteller, the podcast where I chat to different storytellers and find out why they are the way they are. I've yet to get a proper intro. Every episode I'm like, I'll just think of it on the spot, and every episode I'm very disappointed in myself. My guest today is Marcus Acko, and he is the otherwise known as the Idiot on the Writer's Block. Which is a very good name, but I also think you're not an idiot for what it's worth.
Well, but to be honest, everybody else says, well, why do you call yourself the idiot on the writer's block? My wife is like, why are you telling everyone you're an idiot? And it's like, we know you are. Why are you just telling everyone? It's like, I don't know. That's why I'm saying it. I'm the idiot on the writer's block. So yeah.
Very good. Well, as you said, Marcus is the brains behind the Idiot on the Writer's Block YouTube channel, a channel where he talks to other writers. As you say in your own description, I'll talk to experts, but I'd like to add in experts plus one idiot because I've been on the show and I don't consider myself an expert in any way, shape, or form. But that's your decision.
Hey, see, this is the thing. You say there was another writer. You're the third person that has called themselves an idiot as well when I've invited them to come on the show. So there's a writer, Jamie Farley, who she does wonderful blogs on various aspects of writing and books and so on and so forth, and the publishing industry and whatnot. And she said she will only come on the show if I were to refer to her as fellow idiot. So if you look at any of the videos, when I do the little inscription that comes up with the tag to say your name and your profession underneath, I've put her on there, Jamie Fairley, writer, and in quotes, fellow idiot. Nobody has said anything yet because I'm waiting for someone to say, oh, I can't believe you're calling her an idiot. You're the idiot. That's fine. You can call yourself that. So I get cancelled for her calling me
herself an idiot. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, but I'm waiting for that, and I've got the screen prints of her saying to me, "It's okay. That's what I want you to call me." I'm like,
so you're sitting there locked and loaded, ready to be cancelled. And it hasn't happened.
And then it's got to the point where I'm like, at first I was like, be very, very careful. You don't want to get cancelled. And then nobody's really trying to cancel me. I'm like, why is no one trying to cancel me? Maybe if I throw something in there, I'm going to say something really provocative. And my version of provocative is idiot. So it's like, no, dude, trust me.
Anyway, so we've mentioned the YouTube channel, but you're a man of many hats. Like when I was looking through your website, I was like, the list is endless. It's like when you're writing out something for your CV and you're like, oh, and I did this, oh, and I did this, and I'm done. You must be like, and I did this and this and this and this. So we have stage acting, filmmaking, podcasting, the host of a radio show, your YouTube videos, which we've mentioned. You have a graphic novel that came out recently enough, and you also have a non-graphic novel, a literary novel.
I don't even know how to address that. It's like when people say, oh, so what kind of books are you writing? I'm like, well, I've written a graphic novel and I'm writing a novel. It's like, okay.
But I have noticed a pattern, and I hope listeners have too, and this is the main reason I got you onto the show, is all of them in one way, shape, or form are something to do with telling a story in every way, shape, and form. And I know hosting a radio show, I know you have guests on your radio show, but that is a really, like, you're kind of pulling the story out of somebody else, which I would argue is a way of storytelling. So if you look back to little wee 8-year-old Marcus, can you see the roots of that love of storytelling back then, or is it something that just happened as you grew up?
Oh, no, absolutely. So, okay, way back when, and I've told this story a number of times, so it's codified in my head, right? People say, oh, how is it that you know what you wanted to be? I'm like, well, here's why. When I was like 8 years old, around that time, right?
Oh, so I picked the right age.
You did. No, you absolutely, you nailed it. It's like around 8 years old. I wanted to become a priest, right? Because I'm a Catholic. I was raised Roman Catholic. I still consider myself a Catholic, even though I haven't been to church in quite a while. But I'm blaming it on COVID, so that's fine. So I wanted to be a priest, right? Because my favorite priests were the ones who would move away from the lectern and just preach, and they were entertaining. They told stories, and they stuck with me, right? So I was like, you know what? That sounds like fun. I want to do that. I know the Bible. I want to be able to go out in front of people and just do the same thing, tell stories and so on. And then I found out around 10, 11 that pretty much around the same, coincidentally, when puberty hit, that priests weren't allowed to have sex. And so I was like, okay, that's not for me. So I moved on from that. And then I was like, okay, what else would I want to do? And I thought, okay, maybe I can become a soldier, right? Because, get guns and jump in wars and whatnot. But I realized that very quickly that people will shoot back, and that was a problem. So I was like, okay, that's not for me. And then I kept on moving from one to the next, and when I looked back, I found out, and I actually remember the exact moment that this happened. I was about 15. We'd moved from Nigeria, where I was born and raised, to the UK. And around the age of 15, I was watching TV, and this is the point where I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I know I'm 15, yet why am I having midlife crisis at 15? But I was like, okay, I can't think of anything that I want to be when I grow up. And then I was watching an episode of Moesha. I don't know if you know the show,
Yeah.
on Nickelodeon with Brandy Norwood. Now, I knew Brandy Norwood as a singer, right? And then she's now on TV acting in a show. And I've seen other musicians in films, but that thought process never really clicked in until I saw her doing it. And I was like, wait, hold on a second. This is acting and storytelling is an actual job, right? In Nigeria, I never really considered it as a job. I considered it as a hobby. And we can talk more about what I did back then, but I saw it more as a hobby. But this is an actual job. If Brandy can do it, then I can do it. And then that was when I decided, you know what? I love story. I love acting. And that's how it sort of started out. And that was from that moment, from when I was 15, it was basically locked in that was what I wanted to do with my life. And I've had that laser. Okay, it's not laser focused because, as you've told, you've
Lasers can be wide.
Yeah, it's a very massive laser that just focuses on that sort of area of a career, right? And I've been since 15. I've had that locked in that was what I wanted to do, carrying on. And if you look through all of the other careers growing up that I've always wanted to do, was always because either it was about someone telling a story, or I saw it in movies and I saw it in plays and so on. I saw that story
The
being
soldier,
told.
like that's so common in kids media and in adult media and film, TV.
Exactly. I grew up watching First Blood and Rambo and Commando and Predator and so on. So they're all about soldiers, right? Jumping in and doing stuff. So because of that story being told, I wanted to be that character. So looking through all of it, that's exactly what enticed me to love those professions, because of the storytelling. And that's basically now why I've fallen into this. And as you said, all the list of everything that you said are all tied in with storytelling. So yes.
What was it about Brandy and in Moesha that made you go, oh, like was it just because you knew her already doing something else and you saw her shift, or was it that you had a wee crush?
Funnily enough, and I've thought about that as well. I didn't have a crush on Brandy. Okay, I grew up in Nigeria. There's a lot of R&B and hip hop, right? So I grew up knowing Brandy as a singer, right? So, and there were three at the time around the same age. There was Aaliyah, there was Brandy, and there was The Brat, right? The Brat, she's a rapper. Aaliyah, rest in peace, she was a singer, and Brandy was also a singer, right? Now, the crush was on Aaliyah. In my head, it was like Aaliyah was the crush, Brandy was the best friend, and the Brat was the girl that if you wanted to beat other people up, you would call her, right? If you need to go into a fight, you would get the Brat on your side, and the two of you, you'd be standing behind her. She'd be like, and what? And you'd be behind it going, yeah, what? So that was the three for me. So it wasn't a crush on Brandy, but it was just the fact that I knew nothing else about what she did except singing. And the moment she popped up on a TV show and she was leading the TV show as an actress it was not about like her being a singer, it was just about her being a teenager. And again, like I said, I've seen other TV shows, I've seen other films where singers and actors, singers were acting in it, right? But it just never clicked in that it was that.
Yeah, but I think it's because Brandy was the lead. Like she was Moesha. The show was called Moesha. Do you know? And I think that's the difference. Like, because you're right, you do see, like, if you think of Dwayne The Rock Johnson, like years ago, he was just The Rock originally. He wasn't Dwayne anything, and then he appeared in terrible CG, even for the time, in The Mummy 2.
The Mummy 2, yes.
The big scorpion thingy. But then he got a film of his own, and I remember, because similar to that with Brandy Moesha, I remember looking at that going, wait, but no, he's a wrestler.
Yep.
Oh, you can change, you can do
Yes.
what you want. I see. So I understand that kind of thing. I had it with The Rock for some reason.
No, by that point for me, I pretty much had established the understanding that, oh no, people can and often do move from one bit to the next, especially when it comes to acting, right? You had football players like Vinnie Jones, for example. It's like
Course, yeah.
Vinnie, people now, if you show a picture of Vinnie Jones, they think of him as Vinnie Jones the actor,
Yeah.
not the chopper they used to break legs on part of Wimbledon football team, right? Nobody thinks about that. Same thing with David Beckham. I mean, David Beckham's kind of moved back into football, being a manager of, I think it's, is it Inter
Man, if you're top
Miami?
sport, you're on the wrong podcast.
Oh, fair enough. That's good. Okay, well, he's moved back into football, but more managerial. But there was a point where he moved into the acting world, where he'd started working with Guy Ritchie and so on. So it's now so fluid that people flow in and flow out and whatnot. But that moment for me was a seminal point in my career, in my formative mind, where I saw, and I think you're right. I think it's the fact that she was headlining the show, whereas with other people I'd seen, they were
guest star for the one episode, or they were
exactly.
Yeah. Or they were the best friend or the cousin who came to visit for a month. That's all those kind of things.
Exactly.
So was there any story then when you were younger? Like what was the first story in your head that really sucked you in and pulled you in? And I don't want to say the word obsessed, but when you're a kid, like I know for me it was Roald Dahl's Matilda. Like I have a really clear memory of finishing the book, feeling sad for around 33 seconds, and then just closing the book and opening it and starting again on page 1. So like, what was for you? What was the very first story that sucked you in?
So for me, and again, if you follow my history, a lot of stuff is performative, right? So film, TV, theater, that's basically what it is. The book stuff, which is what I'm now kind of immersed in, pretty much came later on. So for me, it would be Bugsy Malone. So Bugsy Malone was the one film that we watched on repeat. We knew the songs inside out because essentially they were kids, right? They were playing grown-ups, and that's what we did. So we'd watch the film, and it would just jump out. And my dad back in Nigeria had this huge VHS camera, and I lived with my family. We're a big family. We all lived together. I was the youngest. I am still the youngest of 4. So yeah, I don't know what my dad's been up to, but anyway, he's not going to listen to this. It's fine. So I'm the youngest of 4, and my 2 brothers above me and my uncles and cousins, we grabbed the camera and we just replicate something. And so we did that, right? I was always the one who wanted to get in and be more involved, but all the older ones were like, nah, we'll just do our own thing. Exactly, right? So that was it. And we made videos of various type of things, various stories that we came up with. My elder brothers and my cousins, they'll make the video and we'd watch it, and I'd be like on the side, I'd be like behind the scenes, right? So I'd come in, I'd be the one who'd help mix the blood and make the sound effects and so on and so forth. And I'd want to be on camera, but it'd be like, no, later, the next project we do, you'll do that. But Bugsy Malone was basically what inspired that, because we saw kids our age doing it, right? And the pie fight at the end was basically, whatever, it was glorious. So we saw that, and that was basically the story that I kept going back into and saying, yes, that's what I love about storytelling. I love about films. I love about acting and so on. So that would be the one I'd go with.
You've hinted at, well, not hinted at, you've said outright, one thing I'm noticing in common a lot is, and not everyone I've had on the show, but most people I've had on the show, they're always like, oh, my whole family, we all read together, or we all talked about the same thing, or we all sat down and watched this particular show or this movie, or in your case, we all used to reenact and make our own movies for fun. And I think that's the thing. It just shows like for some people it is inherent, it is within them, but it's also in the environment that you kind of grow up in. And
yeah, I mean, it did, but back then, because it was all about fun, right? So that's what we did. Growing up, actually, funnily enough, and this is the weird part. A lot of the aspect of actually doing it for fun was when I was back in Nigeria, right? When I came into the UK, it became more of a serious thing. So, I know that there are amateur dramatic societies everywhere where you go and do acting for fun, but I never gravitated towards them. I don't know why. I never had that opportunity, or I never let myself fall into that opportunity. I always went towards the more serious part of things after coming to the UK. So the first acting thing I did in the UK was for my sixth form, jumping in and being in Guys and Dolls, being on stage Guys and Dolls, and then moved on from that, went to university, and then just went straight to the Drama Society and started working with the Drama Society and so on. So essentially, all the acting stuff I was doing after coming to the UK was more serious and career focused. Whereas back in Nigeria, and that's the reason why I never really saw it as a career, it was fun, right? You'd be doing stuff on the weekends, in the evenings for fun. And then, while you're studying to become a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer or something important, something big and useful.
Yeah.
You as a hobby, you can go do the acting thing, which is why we all did that together.
Yeah. And that's something I think hasn't changed. A lot of well, I'm sure there are some parents out there who are like, you want to be an actor? That's fine. Yeah, you can go for it. Like I do remember my own, I was a little bit into acting, a lot of it, not a little bit, a lot of it into acting as well in my younger years. And I was actually literally there with my college applications, looking at and had acting, teaching, and my mum just like smacked the acting one out of my hand, and she just literally said, "You can do that in the afternoons. Teaching, you'll have time. You'll have more than enough free time teaching." I was like, "Fair enough."
That's a similar thing that happened to me. Well, she didn't. My mother didn't slap it out of my hands. She said, "I'll make you a deal, right? You go finish your education, get a full-time degree in a serious subject. Doesn't matter what it is, just a serious subject. As soon as you finish that, once you get that degree, whatever you want to do, go for it, right?" And in hindsight, I can see what she was trying to do. She was trying to say, look, have something that's like a buffer in case anything were to happen, like a fallback plan, right? You can always have that fallback plan to always fall back on. Plus, you never know. By the time once you've got your degree, you may have given up the hope of doing this because the acting thing might just be a fad. And as soon as that's done, it's out of your system and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And I was like, sure, absolutely. So I went and I did psychology, right? So I went to university, I got a psychology degree. But while I was at university, I still kept on with all the acting stuff, joined the Drama Society, even though I was in the psychology department. I think I was in Royal Holloway. I was one of the first students to ever try and cross that boundary where I was taking, they never had where you could do multiple subjects at the same time. Not in that sort of completely opposite science and arts in that situation. I was the first student because I lobbied quite a lot to try and get it done. I think I'm the only student that has done that as well. So I then started taking some modules in drama, even though it wasn't going to contribute to anything at all, but I was allowed to sit there. And when they were doing their final drama projects and so on, I was able to go in and audition and get roles in final drama projects and so on. So I was doing that as well. And then I graduated, got my degree, and I was like, never touch psychology ever again. Although every job that I've had, every like non-acting job, to pay the bills. And that's just the second part. I think this is a sneaky thing to my mom. I think my mother was thinking, she was like, look, by the time he gets to that point, he's going to become a proper adult. He's going to have bills to pay. He's going to have all that stuff. He's going to try and get work, and that would then kill that ambition. Again, this is me just thinking that's what she did. And that's what happened, right? So straight out of uni, had student loans to pay back, overdraft loans that I had taken out and so on. So I had to get jobs, right? And with every job I got, it was always the fact that they would look at my CV and they'd see that I graduated with a psychology degree and they're like, oh, wow, psychology, that's very good. And I think that's pretty much what got me every job. They didn't look at anything else. They're like, oh, he's got a psychology degree. He must be good at something, right? So give him the job. And I'm like, all right, fine, I'll take the job.
Let's go.
I've had a couple of HR people actually say to me, it was like, yeah, we had a ton of people applying for your role, but we saw your psychology degree and we just thought, that's good. Let's go with him. So okay, I saw that was the benefit, but I've not touched my degree. I know people that I graduated with who were in my class who are now like this lady who is a clinical psychologist at the moment. She worked with prisoners. She's doing proper, really good, like what I would consider the Lord's work, if you will, right? She's actually doing good for society, and I'm not. So, well, I say I'm not anyway, but with my psychology degree, that's just, it's collecting dust somewhere. It's kind of like like your driver's license. If a lot of people, a lot of adults have their driver's license and it actually is fine. I don't. I have a provisional license. I've had 3 provisional licenses all expire on me. I get a provisional license because I don't like driving at all. I get a provisional license and then it's like it expires in 3 years. I'm like, oh, it's fine. I'll let it expire. Yeah, there's something else will happen. I'm like, okay, I need to go in. I'll go back in. I'll do my test. I'll ace the test. I'll go in, do the, whatever, start doing my driving tests, right? My driving lessons. I never get to the driving test part. The first time I was like 19, no, I was 17. I was about to go to university and I had it all lined up. I got my driving lessons all sorted out. I know this is a deviation, but I'll just come back to it. Did all that stuff. And then it was a case where I had enough money to either go and do my driving test and pass and then have a driver's license, or go to Alicante with my friends. It's safe to say I had a fun time in Alicante. It was amazing.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. And then a whole bunch of other stuff afterwards and so on. So my provisional license has expired 3 times. I've never renewed it. And then Uber came and I'm like, what's the point of getting a license? I've got an Uber app. If I need to go anywhere, I can just get an Uber. Some stranger comes to my house, picks me up, takes me someplace else. Luckily, it doesn't kill me. So I'm fine, right?
Yeah.
That's all it is.
You can tell you're living in a country that has, an actual effective public transport system, because in Ireland, if you either have a driver's license and your own car, or you live in Dublin. They're your options.
I've heard that. And I've heard that about America as well. It's like, no, you have to have a driver's license. Again, my work side of things they've always tried to get me to go to America and relocate over there. And the first question my managers always ask me is, do you have a driver's license? I'm like, nope. Like, you're going to need to get a driver's license. I'm like, then I ain't coming to America. I'm staying here because I live right next to a train station. I can just hop on there and go anywhere in 30 minutes, like a Domino's pizza delivery. So I'm fine. So, yeah. What were we talking about?
We're talking about you, so it's fine. Like, man, it's my interview, but you're the guest, so you're leading this. I did want to ask you though, because you've mentioned it a few times, about moving from Nigeria to the UK.
Yes.
And because in my research and stuff the other day, I did message you and ask, like, how old were you when you moved? Because my parents also moved countries. We moved from New York, where I was born, to Ireland. My parents are both Irish. I was about to start school and they were like, oh no, we can't have an American for a son. So they moved before I started in the school system there. So you moved at a kind of an in-between age. So like you were too old to stay behind your own, really.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't your decision, from what I gathered, like it was your parents. So what was that like? Because you have your own identity, you have your own life at 14 to an extent, and you have your own friends and stuff. So what was that like?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say, because you were born in, I don't know why the thought just popped into my head. You could be an American president. That's great.
They wouldn't trust me. No.
Hey, I'm just saying. It's like, I don't know why. I think it was a joke I saw someone say about Prince Harry. Archie's born in America, so technically he could become an American president, and that's King George's way of getting America back.
King George's plan all along.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so coming back to my story, essentially when I was 14, what actually happened was, because my father's still in Nigeria, so it was a case where my mother asked me when I was around 13, 14, and she said, okay, here's the situation. I'm moving back. And the reason why was because my father came to London, met my mother, they got married, they went back to Nigeria, and they lived 28 years, I guess, happy years. I don't know. That I was the youngest. It was all oblivious. And I hear stories afterwards. I'm like, wow, okay, I really need to open my eyes more. But it was at that point where the brother just above me, the one we call the good son, in the family. It's an inside joke, but to be honest, not even an inside joke. I tell it to everybody. He's a doctor now. He's a
Well, that makes
serious.
sense. Yeah. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, dude is he's crushing it in the medical game in the UK. So he's obviously
He's saving lives, and you have a YouTube channel.
exactly
Yeah.
right. So who's
Totally
who's
understand.
who's superior? Who on when we get to Heaven's Gate, when it says, "So what did you do for your society?" I helped people write books. Did you? How many people? Well, I have 151 subscribers. So yeah,
Yeah, sure.
who knows? Yeah. Anyway, so my mother needed to. She wanted to move because at that point, the good son, he was about to finish secondary school, and the plan was he was supposed to go to medical school. Now, had we stayed in Nigeria, the thing about Nigeria is they have an
Is he the eldest?
no, he's not. He's the
Okay.
third. He's the third. So my sister was the my sister is the eldest. She was back home. She'd finished. In fact, she was actually at university at the time, and this was what kind of like the deciding factor. Nigeria has an excellent education system, no matter what you want to say about it, because a lot of the students there are very, very smart because of what they learn, how they learn. The education system there is fantastic. The problem is the economic situation back then, right? So what was happening then was university lecturers were constantly on strike because of lack of pay and so on and so forth. So my two other siblings, the first and the second, were at university at the time. It's a 4-year university course, and it took them about 6 years to finish because of strikes. Yes, and that's the thing. So they would strike, and like an entire semester, they would not be at university. So the good son was about to get into university at that point, and my mother, with all her genius foresight, said he's not going to go through that. We're not going to do that for him. Besides, even a Nigerian doctor, and this is more about this geopolitical situation. Somebody who is who's certified as a Nigerian doctor, when they come to any other country, is sort of regarded as a second class, grade, which is ridiculous because again, education system. But anyway, we won't go into politics. But so she knew that was going to be a situation as well, a factor. So she wanted him to get his medical degree back in the UK, because then as a UK doctor, he can go anywhere in the world and he's regarded as royalty, if you will. So she had that plan for him, and he was like, sign me up, I'm good. She turned around to me, she was like, okay, so we know you're 14. We know that you've got friends here, you've got a life here, your dad's still going to stay here. So if you want to stay here and carry on. And I said, Mom, let me stop you there. I'm coming with you because you're going to the UK. I'm going with you. I don't care. She was like, you sure? I'm like, yes. Forget my friends. I'm going. And it was that cruel. It was literally that cruel. But the reason why is because I saw it as well. I mean, yes, Nigeria for me at that point was great. It was fun, and it was exciting.
Well.
Exactly. It was all I knew. But the UK was a new adventure. It was a new frontier for me, right? And I was like, look, I'm gonna go there and I can start my life from scratch. And I have the sense in that regards to know that if I wanted to do anything, I can start from that point and I'll have far more opportunities to be able to do that. And she took me to the UK, and that's how I began. I was like, right from here. Although, came over here, I'm 14. What can a 14-year-old do in the UK, right? It was like, it wasn't as freeing as I thought it would be. A 14-year-old in Nigeria can do pretty much anything that they wanted to do. They're pretty much an adult, right? Not in the UK. So I came to the UK, and that was the first thing I found out. And I was like, okay, it's fine. I'll go to secondary school and do whatever I need to do and claw my way from there. But I still, knowing what I know now, going back, giving me that same question, I'd still choose the same question. I'd still choose the same answer. I'd do that. So that was essentially what it was.
And would you were you familiar with the UK at that stage? Had you been over on like family holidays or like visiting cousins, that kind of thing?
Yes. We came on regular, well, not regular, but like I think I'd come to the UK about 4 times for summer holidays. We'd come in. So my mother still had family here, so we'd come, stay, and I'd experienced it. So I kind of had an idea of what my main experience of it was cold, and it was like, a lot of white people. And that was basically what I understood the UK to be, right? So that was my kind of understanding as to what it was. So I had been, and I knew that was what I was going to be expecting, and then experienced more. So yeah.
Okay, all right. And then what was like you said you'd been in like we were kind of similar, but I was very young, so I didn't have as clear a memory. But like I had been in Ireland maybe like 3 or 4 times, even though I was 5 when we moved over here, which so it wasn't a huge deal. Like it was because mom and dad always called it home. So even though I never lived there at that point, I called it home too. So it was like, oh, we're going back home. But what was the biggest culture shock for you then when you were 14? You said that like in Nigeria, you were practically considered an adult, and then you come here and it's like, I have to wear a uniform and do homework. Like, what was that like?
Hey, I still had to wear uniforms and do homework back in,
Well,
in Nigeria as well. But there were three main things with the main culture shock. First, I've mentioned already is the weather, right? Nigeria is, I mean, we had 2 seasons. It was either dry season or it was rainy season. Either way, it was hot. So there was that. Whereas in the UK, you have 4 seasons, which is always rain. So it was basically all gloomy. So that's basically the one main culture shock that I had, the weather. Second culture shock that I had was to do with space, right? So in Nigeria, there's far more space. People had more space, around. There's a lot more land, so it was, a lot more spacious. Whereas in the UK, you literally houses are just like block and block and block and block, and it's like all cramped together. And then the third culture shock was kind of a reverse of that whole space dynamic, right? Where you would, from my experience anyway, where you have people all living close together, I would assume that everybody will be all up in everybody else's business, right? Or you would know your neighbor and you'd be friends with your neighbor and so on. But because I moved into, when we came in, we moved to South London, so we're within London, and London doesn't have or didn't have that. Well, I didn't experience that kind of
community.
neighborly. Yes, right. People weren't really neighborly with each other. It was like I didn't know who my neighbor was. I didn't know who lived on either side. I might have seen them so I could recognize them, but we never spoke to each other. I mean, I might try and say hi, and they're just like, "What's this? What is this guy trying to talk to me about?" Whereas in Nigeria, even though we had that space between us, it's like I know the person down in the other house and so on and so forth in the neighborhood, right? I would walk around the neighborhood and I knew everybody and everybody knew me. Like, it's just that kid that likes to kick the football over to our house, and the other kids and so on and so forth. So I walk past and like, yeah, he's coming back from school soon. And so on. Everybody knew each other. It was that warm, friendly, sort of culture that was there. And that was a huge culture shock for me because everyone was just basically really shut in and really like, you know, not necessarily suspicious of each other and whatnot, but that was essentially what it
Guarded.
was. Yeah, exactly. Guarded. Thank you. That's the word. Everybody was guarded, and that's exactly how it was. And it would just be different when I get to school and you meet kids and everyone is now like you join your groups and so on and so forth. That became familiar. But when you came home, no one, you couldn't talk to your neighbors, you didn't have fun with your neighbors, and I'm like, I didn't know how to experience that, but yeah, I got used to it. Those are the three main culture shocks: the weather, the space, and the sense of neighborly interaction or sense of community, if you will.
Yeah, and it's interesting because your culture shocks seem to be neither positive nor negative. Like, do you know what I mean? Because sometimes I found, especially when, like, as a teacher, a lot of kids come in, and as a teacher in Dublin as well, there's always a new kid in a class, like
Yeah.
somewhere in the school, if not more than 2 or 3. Um, and that's one thing I'm always like, oh, what's better here compared to your last school or your last town or your last country, depending. Because I'm trying to be like, everything's great that you're here. And a lot of the time, just because a lot of the times, especially when they're coming into a new school, they're like anxious and they're looking around, they don't know. So I always try to keep focusing on the positive. So for you, was there anything that this is better in Nigeria, but this is better here in the UK?
Oh yes. Oh, plenty.
At that
So
age
let's
specifically.
yeah. Let's say things that were better in Nigeria that weren't as great. I mean, that whole sense of interaction definitely was for me was better in Nigeria than it was in the UK. Also, not only that, I mean, yeah, kids can be mean and so on and so forth, but there wasn't an element of there wasn't an element of racism in Nigeria. No, okay, let me rephrase that. There was racism in Nigeria, but it wasn't as vicious as it was in the UK, because again, majority black, but there were white people around. So, but the level of racism that you would experience as, and I'm mixed race, right?
Mm.
So, but the thing is, my skin color changes depending on the weather, right? So if it's really, really hot, I get darker. So people look at me and they would just assume that I'm dark. But my mother, no matter how dark it got, she was still pale, right? Pale skin. So the racism that I perceived towards her was not the same kind of racism that you could experience in the UK, because it was more the assumption of her being either rich or privileged, etc. So nobody really was, yelled, negative words at her or whatever. The word was oyinbo, which would be called, which is white person, right? Which was more a term of, hey, look, it's like an alien. An alien's just landed. That's pretty much what it was.
Okay.
You have kids running up. It's like, hey, look, it's an alien. It's an alien walking past. So it's not like they're pelting you with stones or like, the police coming, stopping you and patting you down and whatnot, right?
So it would have been the racism you witnessed in Nigeria would have been more born from ignorance and unusual rather
Yes.
than from hate or like rejection
Yes.
of the other kind of thing.
Very well put. It's like you should be a teacher or something. Absolutely.
Or maybe a writer. Like
Oh, writer. Exactly. No, but
both.
you're absolutely spot on with that, because it wasn't from a place of hate. It was from a place of difference, right? Or as you put it, ignorance, right? So it's like they see like my mother and other people like her and immediately assume, wow, that person is different. Their world must be really like special and so on. It did have an effect on her, mainly because when it came to like work, there were, nepotism did exist in the industries as well. So people were hiring people that looked like them over people like her, and that kind of got frustrating. But it wasn't a case of they didn't want to hire her because they thought that she wasn't good at doing the job, right? They just hired other people because I guess, so plainly put, because of corruption, right? So they just hired their friends and their family to be in that place over her. So there was
Do
that
you think,
element.
just because you mentioned earlier that there was the assumption that because your mother was white that she was rich, do you think there was ever a case of, oh, we'll hire him because we know he has, 3 kids to feed instead of this lady because she's just a rich white lady?
I mean, you not. I mean, not trying to take away the goodwill element of that. There wasn't the idea of, oh, this person is more in need of that position, but it's more along the lines of, well, it's okay for her because she's going to be able to take care of herself.
Yeah.
It's fine, so we don't have to hire her. But I'll give it to my friend. My friend can still take care of himself and may not be qualified enough to do the job, but I'll still give him anyway. So there was more of that element. Coming to the UK, on the other hand, was completely different, because again, I went to South London. I grew up in South London when I came here, and I could see that clear racism actually exist, right? I saw black kids, I saw Asian kids, I saw white kids, and although we all mixed, there was that racial tension that did exist, and was in the air and was palatable. Is it palatable? Is that a word? It was.
No, yeah,
It was.
palpable. That's it.
Yes, it was palpable. Thank you. It was palpable. It was you could sense the racial tension in the air. And then add the police as well, right? Again, the police, that was an element of racism that existed in London, or still exists in London, that I experienced. And I was like, I never knew that this was there. Now, flip that around, right? Where so we talk about the positive from Nigeria as a negative in the UK. The positive in the UK compared to the negative in Nigeria at the time, as I perceived. If we talk about the police as well, you had a police force that, even if they might have singled you out as a black person and patted you down and so on and so forth, that was pretty much what I experienced. I know that a whole bunch of other people experienced far worse than I did, but at least you knew that there was like a structure in place that was fine. Whereas in Nigeria, you'd have there was an adage that my brother used to tell me, where if you're walking in the street at night and you see on one end of the road, you see armed robbers coming towards you, and you turn around and you see police officers coming on the other side of the road, run towards the armed robbers because you'd be safer.
Well,
That is because it's literally the case where in certain areas in Nigeria, and it was rife, and it's a problem. I guess it's probably being dealt with now. It's been such a long time since I've been there, so I don't really know. But police corruption was rife. It was terrible. I lived in an area where there was this section of the police called road safety, and effectively like traffic police, if you will. And I knew the guys that were there, and it would be a case where they'd sit there, do nothing, and every now and again they would just say, "Hey, I need some cigarettes. Let's go for a ride." And they would get in their car and they'd ride down the road and just stop any car they wanted, regardless of whatever. And they would start saying, "Oh, you were speeding." "Well, no, I wasn't speeding." "Like, no, we caught you. You were speeding. Your licenses seem to be expiring," and so on and so forth. "Yeah, I'll tell you what, if you just got a packet of cigarettes and some money, give it to us and you can go on your way." That kind of stuff. There was that level of corruption that was there that I could never experienced while I was here. So you could see that there was something set. There was like, there were the organizational structure set in place. And that for me was great, right? It was the fact that you're coming to a country where something like bribing a police officer is actually a crime, and the police officer actually trying to force you to bribe them. I'm not being naive. I know that did exist, especially in the UK. It did,
but it
and it
wasn't
does
as
exist.
apparent as you had.
Exactly.
And not only that, we're talking about your perceptions as a 14-year-old.
Yes.
So, like, as adults, if we were the adults then in Nigeria, the corruption would have been far more apparent. And it's
Absolutely. And even again, back in Nigeria, police would stop me and see if I had cigarettes, because again, a 14-year-old is considered, well, at that point was considered an adult, and a 14-year-old could walk around with cigarettes. So a police officer could have stopped me, taken cigarettes from me and whatever. Whereas in the UK, from my experience anyway, it was not a thing that was common, or like you see police officers, and again, depending on who you are, if white kids would see police officers and not have, in the same now anyway, white kids would see police officers and not bat an eye. If anything, they'd be belligerent towards the police officers. Whereas the black kids that I hung out with, we all knew what to expect when the police officers were there. But again, it wasn't a case where I knew the police officers were not likely to shoot and kill me, because for one, they didn't have any guns, which is different from the UK. So those were the kind of elements that were different. Also, the fact that in the UK, I knew, and I just could sense it, even as a 14-year-old. I had far more opportunities in any area I wanted to go in the UK than I would have had in Nigeria, because that's exactly what it is. Because I knew people who, as soon as they got the opportunity to, they left the country and they went out because of lack of opportunity. So I knew that was going to be a situation as well. So that for me was the benefit of coming to the UK over staying in Nigeria.
Okay. There's a lot there, and it's I want to acknowledge that you have spoken on racism and your experiences of it and everything like that. And if I knew you were willing to talk about that, I would have dived a little bit further into it.
Hey, I told you, any question you want to ask me, ask me.
I know I have so many that I want to ask you, so I'm just making sure that you're aware, and anyone listening is aware. That is something maybe we could have a different talk about for a different episode someday. But now I want to talk a little bit about some other things. So I hope I'm not being disrespectful of being, okay, let's move on from your experiences of racism and talk about something like that's not the intention.
I was gonna make a joke there, but again, I'll pull it back.
Oh, go for it. It's fine. I need to know what the joke is now.
I was gonna say, you're white. It's okay. You can disregard a black person. Moving on.
Nothing to that.
You've gone red. Wow, you have gone super red.
For anyone listening, I'll put a link to this one moment on the YouTube video in the description so you can see how red I went. Because anyway, listen, I went red, but not from embarrassment, just from the sheer, oh my God, I can't believe he just said that. That's brilliant. So.
I did warn you. You said go for it, so I went.
I did. Hey, look, I said go for it. I got what I deserved. I'd love now to talk about your writing, because you've written and created stories in lots of different formats and ways. I mentioned your graphic novel, 1-800-Kill-A-Guy. You have your novel, which the Atticus
the Mighty, yes.
Atticus the Mighty. I was going to say the Atticus Project for some reason. Atticus the Mighty. And you've also worked in film and everything like that. And it all comes under the umbrella, I believe, of 8-Foot Ants.
Yes.
So can you tell me a bit about 8-Foot Ants, and what was the build up to it, and what was the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of starting 8-Foot Ants?
Okay, so with 8-Foot Ants, let's build up to that point. So Just really quickly, trying to be as concise as I can be, which is a thing I don't know how to be.
I can tell.
You can't tell, but yes. So I started off. I started off after the whole Moesha incident. I wanted to become an actor. That's what I wanted to start off being. Problem was, it was difficult to get parts, so I figured, you know what, it'll be easy for me to write my own scripts, and that way I have a part I can do. So I started writing scripts. Exactly, right. But then I'd write scripts and I'll give it to people that I know they want to direct and so on, and they'd start saying, oh, this is great, but I want to do this and this, and I'm like, no. And I took the thing back and I was like, I'll tell you what, I'll do it myself. So I started trying to direct the scripts that I'd written so that I can be in it, right? And then obviously I can't just direct it, I had to produce it as well. So I ended up being writing, director, producer, actor of the thing. And I, in 2005, I almost had a nervous breakdown because I did a project where it was this film that I wanted to do, which was kind of like a stage play, and it's kind of it like Noises Off, if you will. I don't know if you know the film, and it's a theater thing about, it's a film, well, there's a theater show about it, but it's a film as well with Michael Caine, and it's about this farce, right? It's a farce. Is this stage show that is being put on, and you're seeing what's happening backstage and on stage at the same time, right? You're flicking back and forth. So that was the idea, and it was called We Give You. That's the film project I had. So you get to see the audience members, and you get to see the show that's being put on, and you get to see what's happening in the audience, in backstage. And I had this whole idea where it was going to be like found footage, not found footage, but like, found footage, right? Because it was different people's perspectives with different cameras all over the place, security camera from backstage, somebody with a camera, Edinburgh scout in the audience, some friends shooting it for the director, and so on and so forth. So you get to see everything from all those angles. But having to coordinate all of that stuff as a writer, producer, director, shuttle guy, house, whatever, doing everything, I almost just broke down. And somebody who had the sound, she just went missing. I don't know where she is. I hope nothing bad has happened to her, but if she's listening to this, you have my sound, bring it back. This is 2005, so I've let it go now.
You don't care if it's 16 years later. Like, I need to know where she went.
Honestly, if I see her on the streets, I'm gonna be like, give me my sound. That'll be the first thing. I'll be like, hi, how you doing? Give me my sound back. And I'll take that back, right? So at that point, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what I'm doing wrong. So I read, and at the time, Kevin Spacey was the artistic director of the Old Vic in Waterloo. So I reached out to them. I said I was going to be concise. I'm not concise at all. I was going to reach out to them. I reached out to them, and he didn't answer me, but one of his assistants did, and she called me over to have an interview, and she was like, okay, first things first, you can't be all of those things. You need to pick one thing and work on it. I'm like, I'll take your advice. I won't, but I'll pretend I'll take your advice. So she was like, okay, here's the thing. We've got this thing going on called 24-hour plays. We're looking for writers, directors, producers, and actors. I think you should go as an actor into that project, audition for it and see what happens. So I auditioned with like 10,000 other people. I got on. I was like one of 30 people selected, right? So the whole thing was, we have weeks of workshops with various people that came in, actors, directors. Tom Hollander came in, not Tom Hollander. I think it's Tom Hollander. I may be messing his name up. Very funny Spider-Man? Guy. No, that's Tom Holland.
Yeah. Okay.
So not Tom Holland. If you remember Pirates of the Caribbean, the second and the third one, the bad guy in the second and third one, who was like the admiral of the Navy, right?
Oh, okay.
I think it's Tom Hollander, and I maybe missed it. Him. He was one of those people, and Kevin Spacey as well. He'd come on and he'd give us sort of like workshops and so on about acting and whatnot. And it all culminated in this one night where the writers, we'd all pair up into different groups. The producers would basically pick different people and put them together in one group. They'd pick a writer and a director, and they would write a sketch in. The whole thing had to be, a sketch had to be written. The actors had to come in and practice and rehearse the sketches, and then go on stage to a full Old Vic audience and perform within the space of 24 hours. So we had all that stuff to be done. One of the greatest experiences.
Assuming you none of you slept then.
Get all that done. The actors slept, right? So the actors, we slept in shifts. So basically, we'd meet up at midnight the first night, and we work right through. And the performances would start at 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. the next day. So the actors went to sleep from midnight till about 6 a.m. So we'd wake up at 6 a.m., go to the Old Vic to go and find out which teams we were in. And then we'd go in and we'd get our scripts at like 7 a.m. and then start rehearsing from 7 a.m. right through till
until
7 p.m.
showtime.
Exactly, until showtime. So we do that. And really, I'm kid you not, is one of the best experiences in my life, bar none. I say one of, right? It's bar none. Obviously, my marriage and the birth of our kids, that though that comes up there too.
One of the best professional experiences.
Yes, that's much
Yeah,
better for you. Yes, exactly. Anyway,
before you.
so that was the theatrical, that was the stage performance that basically capped it for me. I was like, you know what, this is great. I still want to carry on. I want to do films, right? So I started using that opportunity to try and reach out to other filmmakers to work with me, and while I was still holding on a full-time job at the same time. So that sort of pulled, different directions. I did get into a number of different productions with some people, teamed up with some others, almost made a film, but that kind of fell apart. And I was like, look, I have met a lot of people in the industry who are trying to get stuff done. So I want to set up sort of like a company that, we can all work together on. And a lot of times when I was trying to work with people, I would hear them say, "Oh, but I've got my own production company. I've got my own stuff that I'm doing and whatnot." And everybody would come in and we're like, "But I'd like to work with you on one project," and then go off, and another person would say the same thing. So I figured, okay, how about a collective where at any point I can do a project and people can come in and work with me on that project, and we'll be working under this banner. And I don't know where the name came from. I think it was a friend. I think it was Anthony Chalice who suggested eight. The last time I remember speaking to him, he said he'd said something. I heard him say 8-foot ants, and I said that sounds amazing. And he was like, I didn't say 8-foot ants, and I'm like, but I think that sounds
But I
amazing.
did. I
Yeah,
heard that. So that's
exactly. I heard that. I think it's great. We're gonna go with it. So he was like, fine, okay. If you become successful, I'll get some royalties. And I've never spoken to him again. So I took that idea of 8-foot ants and basically set up this, the production company where I said, right, it'll be a collective where creatives can come in. You don't have to be signed to 8-foot ants. You can work on 8-foot ants projects as a collaborator. You'll come in, we'll work together. Then you can go off and do your own thing. And then I'll work with some other people and do that. So I was like, okay, should I just focus on one thing? No, I can't just focus on one thing because I want to do so many things. I want to, work to get, it was mainly supposed to be a film thing, but at the same time, I wanted to tell a lot of stories, right? And a lot of stories that come into my head, I can't make a film about it because then it takes a lot to make a film, even a short film. It takes a lot. And then I got introduced to graphic novels, and I was like, "This is amazing." I mean, I watched Sin City, and Sin City was amazing. Then I went and started reading the graphic novels, and I was like, "Okay, this is actually quite good." Only thing is, I don't know how to draw to save my life, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but I was like, but this would be perfect because I can tell all the stories the way I see them in my head in a graphic novel, and I can make it as elaborate as I want it to be. So that could be something that I can do as 8-foot ants. And then at the same time, well, around not the same time, a few years later, while I was still working on a graphic novel, Color City, which has now come out, I was on a flight to Thailand for work for the full-time job. And I ended up sitting next to this lady, and she was asking me questions about what type of stuff she watch. And, we just struck up a conversation, and I was recommending a whole bunch of stuff. And she was like, you seem like you know quite a lot about films. Would you like to, do you ever, consider doing a radio show? I was like, I'd love to do a radio show. I love to do nothing but talk about films, but I don't have any of the resources. All my stuff had just been focused on films, right? And trying to get up there. And she was like, well, I'm an engineer in this, radio station called Resonance FM. We're looking for stuff, so go and pitch. I was like, oh, all right. That lady was Laura Sampson, or is Laura Sampson. She became my co-host on the show Shoot the Breeze on Resonance FM. So I then produced that through 8-foot ants, right? And we're still doing that. We brought producer David Campbell on board, and it's basically been the three of us doing the show for like 3 years now.
Wow.
So that's how that fell under the
just from a chance encounter, like.
Yes. Oh, I believe in. I believe in. Okay, I know a lot of people talk about destiny. I don't believe in destiny per se, but I do believe that there are signs, right? So put it as wishy-washy as you want. I think that there are signs along our path where if you choose to see a sign and follow that direction, it'll lead you to something that you're looking for, right? So it'll lead you to one particular thing. A lot of signs could lead you in one direction, and then you choose the wrong, you make the wrong decision, and then you fall off that path. But the signs are there to lead you to the direction that you want. That was perfect because I decided I wanted to get to that flight early. I was like, you know what? I could go and sit down or grab something to eat, which I normally do at the airport, or I could just go and sit down as early as I can on the flight. And that was my choice. And because I did that, she happened to be doing the same thing at the same time. So we had tons of time before the flight, which was why we started talking. Had I not done that, I wouldn't have met her,
Yeah, exactly.
and that wouldn't have happened. And then having done the radio show, because the show is about film enthusiasts just sitting down and talking about films, and a lot of filmmakers wanted to use that as an opportunity to promote their projects. So I got to meet a lot of producers, and I met tons of producers who are maybe not necessarily household names, but these are working filmmakers who are doing the work, right? They're just getting in there and getting it done. Bijang Tong, who's in Hong Kong at the moment, Paul Knight, Giles Alderson, whole bunch of the Shakespeare sisters. All these are all filmmakers in the UK who are really grafting to make good films, right? So that then spurred back up the interest into making films. So I was like, I have to try and get it done. So I sat down, wrote a script, and so that's how basically everything started building up and building up. Because I had set up this company of 8-Foot Ants to allow me to be able to say, look, anything I'm trying to do, I'll do it under the 8-Foot Ants banner. And that's why. So 8-Foot Ants is essentially a company that is it's my company that is there welcoming anyone who wants to come and work with me. And if they want to work as their own independent producer, that's fine. Every time I try to say, wait, do you want to come on board as 8-Foot Ants as a producer? Everyone's like, nah, it's okay. But I'll happily work with you. And so I'm like, whatever it is. And that's basically how the project has been going. So that's what 8-Foot Ants is. It's basically a wide-spanning production company that deals in anything creative. So far, we've got radio shows done. I've done a number of short films that's under the 8-Foot Ants banner, the graphic novel that's coming out. And now, because of COVID, that kind of shelved one of the feature films I was working on because I'd written this psychological thriller called Pull Out Couch. It's about an emotionally abused wife who turns the tables on her husband when she traps him inside a pull-out couch, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it was originally supposed to be a comedy, and then I was reading this book. I was reading Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, right?
Yeah.
And in it, he was saying, take some ideas that you think are comedies and flip it, make it into a drama. So I was like, let's do that. So I took that idea. How do I make it more of a drama? And then that's where I was like, okay, maybe it's about abuse. It's actually a story about abuse, and both emotional and physical and so on. And wrote the script. Very, very dark. It gets very, very dark. And I was going to shoot that in 2020, but then COVID hit, and then yeah, exactly. So
the things that would have happened in 2020.
I know, right? I know I'm just one of a million people who said that sentence. So because of the COVID and lockdown and pandemic, I was like, okay, well, I'm still doing the radio show because we can do that over Zoom. But everything else has shut down. What else do I want to do? So I went on YouTube and I started watching and someone suggested doing a book, but I don't know how to write books. All the stuff I've written scripts. Scripts are great, easy, but writing a novel is completely different. So I started watching YouTube videos on how to do that, and I found this channel called Megalator, I Writely, and she's amazing. She gave a lot of advice. She was talking about how she said one of the best things you can do is start up a YouTube channel because that way you can build up an audience before the book's out, and then you have people who would want to read your book. And so I was like, okay, what can I do that would be of service as well? I could always do a YouTube channel, which is like entertainment and try and entertain people. But maybe I can actually provide a service as well, because again, her advice, it's better to give, and then that will pull people in. So
what's the phrase? You trap more flies with honey than vinegar.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. So I just figured, you know what? I'm an idiot when it comes to writing books because I don't know anything about writing books. So how about I just start asking experts, right, to tell me how can I write a book? I've got this question about how to write a book. tell me what I need to do. So I was like, let me do that. And I'll interview tons of people and then put that as the videos, right? Which would then slowly start to build people up. Meg Latour was on the channel. You were on the channel giving me great advice. Yeah, there was a post that came up saying, it was somebody sitting right next to me, just listening to when I was watching the video. I was like, who's that sexy Irishman? I was like, yep, he's going to be on every video I do from now on. So it's
sexy Irishman. Also, it wasn't me. So what was the other Irish author you had on?
Yeah, well, you're the only Irish person that's on the channel. So that's how the Idiot on the Writer's Block then came about, right? So it's then that under 8-Foot Ants as well. And then there was the whole idea of me trying to get the books done and then giving them to other publishers to try and publish. But I was like, well, the problem with that is, there are millions of people trying to get their books published. If I were to try and go the traditional route, then I'm going to be waiting years to try and get one book done.
It's a very slow process. And I think that's something anyone who maybe listening or watching this show, they would have heard me say in other interviews, but I don't think people outside of writing realize how slow the traditional process can be. I mean, I could give a fully polished, ready to go manuscript to a publisher, to a traditional publisher, and it could be 2 years before it comes out.
Exactly. And I didn't have that time to wait to do that. So I just figured, hey, 8-Foot Ants is already publishing a whole bunch, is already producing a lot of stuff. I'll just produce it under 8-Foot Ants banner. So technically, I'm now publishing. 8-Foot Ants is now a publishing company as well. Exactly. So that's why it's just that open creative endeavor where any creative product that is going out, I will be doing. So I'm essentially the spearhead for 8-Foot Ants, but I call it a collective of creatives because anybody can just basically say, I want to work with you. Come on then, come work as part of 8-Foot Ants.
It's a collective in that you're collecting all these different people.
Yes, exactly.
and then you're releasing them once they're happy to go back to the
absolutely.
So it does. It's a collective in that sense, and it makes sense.
Absolutely, that's how I look at it anyway. So if anybody is interested in working on any 8-Foot Ants project, they come to me. We work together. If they say, "Oh, that was great. I enjoyed working on this project anyway," I'm happy to go. They can just wander off, and that's how 8-Foot Ants came to be.
Brilliant. And you've kind of covered there my next question, which was about Idiot on the Writer's Block. But I'm also noticing that we're really tight on time.
Yes.
So what I am going to do is I'm going to have links to your YouTube channel as well. Anyway, in the show notes and all that kind of thing. I have to say, when you asked me to be on your channel, I was very honored. And then after the before and after our recording of my appearances on your show, I was very interested and I actually watched an awful lot of your content. So it is a fantastic resource as a writer, and also it's quite entertaining to boot. So I highly recommend it to anyone watching or listening.
Thank you. That I deeply.
But once you do that, make sure that you're subscribed to me on YouTube before you go anywhere near Marcus.
Absolutely.
Finding the subscription rate is not great. I did want to talk a little bit more about your graphic novel and anything, but what I might do is, seeing as I'm going to be having you on to make me go red about remarks about racism, we can do racism and more about your books. So we'll just go to the last few questions that I ask the same questions to everybody, and it's always really different, really interesting. So when this interview is over and we've hit record, stop, and all that kind of thing, what's the first thing you're going to do?
I'm going to go hang out with my kids and my wife, because that is essentially it. With lockdown, we're all trapped in together, right? But yeah, that's basically the next thing I'm going to be doing. I juggle a whole lot of stuff. That is primarily what happens whenever I'm not doing any of the creative stuff. I basically am trying to be creative with my family. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing the moment we hit finish.
Brilliant. I mean, my next question is always, so what are your bigger goals as a writer? But I kind of feel like I know from listening, I mean, you want to release and you want to publish graphic novels, films, like there's anything, but what would be, how can I put it? What would be the one thing that when you get it, notice it when that is, when you get it done or released or whatever, you'll be like, that's it, I've made it, I'm a full-time creative now?
It would be making a film, and I've got this vision in my head, right? It'll literally be at the premiere of my first film, right? A film that I've acted in, I've directed, I've produced, I've written, and we are at the premiere, and it's a packed house, and we're there, and I'm watching myself on screen, watching that project, and it's a success, right? Obviously not everyone may be loving it, but at least people are enjoying it. That would be the point where I've said, yes, okay, I have now hit that pinnacle. I'm great. I'm happy with that. Obviously, an Oscar or a BAFTA would be great too, but each step at a time. That would essentially be. And if we're to put a fine point on it, then it'll be that. And I know you shouldn't really rely on awards as a way of sort of validating who you are. Which is the reason why I would say that. But at the back of my mind, it would be that Oscar acceptance speech, because at that point, it would be the reason why I'm looking at that is because it's not just from me, it's other people reaction to me. As much as it is a sense of me standing there receiving something that other people have turned around and said, this is what we think about the work that you've done. So it doesn't even have to be the Oscar. It doesn't have to be BAFTA. It doesn't have to be Golden Globe. It can just be an award. It could just be me standing on stage.
It could be a 5-star review on Amazon.
It could be, yes. As long as I can give an acceptance speech of that 5-star award, that would be it. So
hey, you have your own YouTube channel. I mean, every time you get a fight, you just have it up on screen and just stand up and like, thank you so much. I want to thank my mom.
Exactly what I'm going to do. That's exactly what I'm going to
do. So other than your YouTube channel, where can people find you and all of your many creative outlets online?
So the radio show / podcast is Shoot the Breeze on Resonance FM, or you can say Shoot the Breeze Show. I'm on Instagram with the radio show, Shoot the Breeze Show. On Twitter, it's at STB_Resonance FM. But if you want to talk to me about the radio show, Instagram is best. That's the best place. On Twitter, with the YouTube channel, it's all across the board, ION Writer's Block. So Idiot on the Writer's Block. So ION Writer's Block. That's across all channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Or if you want to follow me personally, I don't tweet as much. It's on Twitter. It's it's Marcus_Ako, AKO. But I tend to use that channel just to retweet my Idiot on the Writer's Block stuff. So that's because of all the different, I'm like, okay, I need to slow down on some things. So the me channel bit, it's more to read and check out other people's posts and stuff and retweeting my stuff. I tend to tweet more out of the Idiot on the Writer's Block Twitter channel than the others. So there's that. For the podcast, you can get it on Spotify or any podcast channels. YouTube one, obviously on YouTube. And just go to 8footantsproductions.com and see a list of everything that I'm working on, all the other projects, everything, short films, and so on and so forth, all listed there.
All there. And of course, as always, I'm going to have links in the YouTube description and on my website and the podcast show notes as well. And then finally, for my final question today, Marcus, what was the last book you read?
Last book, I'm currently reading it, actually. It is Anya Pavel's. I always forget that it's the
Moon Hunters.
That's the one, Moon Hunters. Yes, I'm currently halfway through it. Love Anya Pavel's work. Here's the thing: I started reading it and I was like, okay, so this is. I mean, we're not in the same sort of like genre category, and it's not a competition. It's never really a competition, right? But when you start reading stuff from people that are really, really good, easily better than you, you're like, I'll just stay in my lane then, shall I? It's like, Anya, if you get into the graphic novel business, I'm coming for you, okay? So, if you're doing graphic novels, keep it as completely different genre from Call 1-800-Killer Guy. Call 1-800-Killer Guy is a Sin City-esque type graphic novel. It's got violence, it's got sex, it's got bad language. So that's my lane. Anya, you stick to doing middle grade graphic novels, okay? That's where you stick to. Don't come with
this started as the book I'm currently reading is and ended with a threat.
With a threat, yes. That's damn straight. Anya, I think you're great. So yeah.
Marcus, thank you so much for coming on the show. It has been a blast, and you've taken us down roads I didn't know we would go down, but I think it was a brilliant interview, and thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure. I enjoyed every single second of it.
Brilliant. See ya.